sit down, don't you think? Well, it's great to be with you today. What a crowd. This is exciting. I'm delighted to be with you. It's a little gray outside. I'm a little surprised, but you know, it's one of the great things about Iowa, and that is that the water comes from the sky. You see, I used to work on a ranch in Idaho, and in the ranch in Idaho, to get the water for the corn, we had to irrigate, all right? So there's the big irrigation ditch, and you had to open up the ditch and let the water run down between the rows between the corn. On the way home in the train, I looked out the window and I saw Iowa, where the rain came from the sky. I said, that's how God intended it. God must love Iowa. No question about that. Yeah. I was telling that story to a guy named Larry Solly, who worked at Fisher Controls in Marshalltown, Iowa. I used to work there, and one of my first jobs as a consultant was doing some work with them. And I mentioned that story to Larry, and he said, God doesn't just love the land in Iowa, he loves the people too. And I have to tell you, I'm beginning to feel the same way. I have to let you know. I've had the privilege of now visiting 57 counties in Iowa, and my son Josh has visited 99 counties. Yeah, Josh and his wife and their 3 kids got a Winnebago and went all over the state. It's fun. He's seen the world's largest catfish, the world's largest frying pan. There are all sorts of wonderful features here in Iowa that you just can't miss. But I'll tell you, I had a big anniversary just recently, and that was I turned 60 years old. And that's a traumatic experience, as some of you may recall, and for others that'll happen in the far distance, right? And you know, my boys, recognizing how important the decade was, got together and bought me a gift, a special gift. And I came home from church and they handed me a key. And I said, gosh, did you guys buy me a car? And they said, go out the driveway, take a look. And I thought maybe a new Corvette, you know, or new Mustang or something like that. Went out in the driveway. There's a 1962 Rambler American. That was not what I expected, I'll tell you. But there was significance for me because my dad had run the company that made Ramblers until 1962 when he became governor of Michigan. And he was 3-term governor there, so this car was connecting me to my dad and our past. And of course, they expect me to pass this car on to them, and I will. And it won't have a lot more miles on it either, because it doesn't run real well. We started the thing up, you know, and drove it up and down in front of the house and pushed it home. And I said to the boys, look how much cars have changed. If you haven't driven an old car lately, you ought to try it. The steering wheel's huge. That's because there's no power steering. You need the leverage, you know, and there are no seat belts. They didn't have in 1962. Power steering, I mentioned. The defroster, one of my favorites. You turn the defroster on, and it still works, just like it did before. You hear it working and working. Nothing changes on the windshield, but it's working. So I said, you know, guys, you see in the private sector where I spent my life, first in small business and then larger business, you either get better or your competitor gets better and puts you out of business. You're always changing, always improving. And after a lifetime in the private sector, I went off and got to be governor of Massachusetts for 4 years, and I found that in government, nothing changes. Everything is the way it's been for year after year. You look back and things are, you know, they develop a program, they don't come back and say, you know what, that program doesn't work very well, let's get rid of it. No, they let it sit there forever. They just put another one and another one. I'm told there are 342 different economic development programs in this country. Some of them in different agencies and departments. There are 13 teenage prevention programs in the federal government. They're obviously not working, first of all, but number two, there are a lot that I'd say, look, let's combine these. Let's find the ones that are working and eliminate the excess and the duplication. We've got to become more effective and more efficient. I want to see change in Washington. If there's ever been a time that change was needed in Washington, I think it's now. And let me just note in that regard that I think a lot of us hope to see a lot of change when we took over the House and the Senate and the White House in the Republican Party. But then we saw, that's the way I like to get, but then we saw we did a little too much earmarking, we spent too much pork barrel money, and ethical standards became lax or were lax. And you know, when Republicans act like Democrats, America loses. It's time for us to change. Change begins with us. Now, Hillary Clinton stands up and says she's the candidate of change. And she would change things. There's no doubt about that. There's some truth to that. It's just not the kind of change you want to see. In my opinion, Hillary Clinton takes her guidepost from the Europe of old. Big government, big brother, big taxes. That's not the right way for America. When she spoke about the economy, she said we could raise taxes on Social Security taxes. We can raise personal income taxes. We can raise corporate taxes. You don't want to raise taxes. That doesn't grow the economy. That slows it down. My view is it's not fair to tax people when they earn their money, when they save their money, and again when they die. So first let's make the death tax dead forever. And second, I have a plan for savings. And my view is that people who are earning $200,000 a year and less, that's almost all of us in this country, 95% of Americans. If you're earning $200,000 a year and less, my view is you ought to be able to save your money with a new tax rate on your interest and your dividends and capital gains, and that tax rate is zero. Let people save their money for their future. I have to tell you that I was mentioning that in Nevada a little while ago, just before, I think, just before the Ames straw poll, and one of the fellows in the audience, Bill Dio, was there, and I was describing John Edwards' plan too. John Edwards has a plan where you get to save $250 a year tax-free. And I said, whoop-de-doo on that plan. And I said, it won't buy you much of a house, won't buy you retirement, won't buy you a college education. And then Bill Dio popped up and said, it won't buy him a haircut either. So anyway. Very different direction. Hillary Clinton looks at health care. And she says, you know, health care is not working for all Americans, and that's true. And she says, therefore, we have to put more government into it. We're going to give people government insurance and $110 billion in new spending and higher taxes. That's the wrong way. If there's something that's not working well, you say, how do we get government out of it? How do we make it more market-based? How do we give people more responsibility and more choice? That's what I've tried to do in my state of Massachusetts, I think successfully. Half the people that were uninsured when I became governor are now insured. I think we're going to get almost everybody insured over the next year or two. So there are ways of getting the private market work to make sure that our citizens get insured and that we get our healthcare system to work properly. There are other places we disagree. The Democrats look at immigration and they say we have an illegal immigration problem. I have the answer, just make them all legal. That's not the right answer. That's amnesty. The right answer is to say, look, we're going to enforce our borders, secure our borders. We're going to make sure that people who come here legally are welcome. We love legal immigration, but we're going to end illegal immigration. And you have perhaps one of the greatest issues of our time, the spread of radical jihad, violence associated with radical Islam. And John Edwards has the temerity to say that there's no global war on terror. It's just a bumper sticker. Now you tell that to the people in Indonesia and Malaysia, and Pakistan and India and Lebanon and Israel and Egypt and Tanzania and Kenya and Algeria and Nigeria and Germany and England and, by the way, New York City and Washington, D.C. There's a war being waged by the terrorists. And if I'm president, it'll be waged and won against the terrorists. One thought in that regard. You know, it's been popular for some in the media and some politicians to be highly critical of the president. But let's not forget one thing. He has kept America safe these last 6 years. And that didn't just happen. I mean, he fought for the Patriot Act to give law enforcement the information they needed to find the bad guys before they attacked. He interrogated detainees, terrorists, to find out what their plans were. He made sure that if Al-Qaeda was calling into this country, we were listening. And you heard the story about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the so-called mastermind of the 9/11 tragedy. When he was captured, he turned to his captors and he said, I'll see you in New York with my lawyers. I kid you not, that's what he said. But that's not what happened. No, he saw CIA interrogators and GIs in Guantanamo, just like it ought to be. Change to Washington. I know that a lot of people in Washington that say that they don't like change there. Well, get used to it. Because if I come to Washington, we're going to change things. We're going to make our healthcare system work for all Americans. We're going to help our schools. We're going to end illegal immigration. We're going to make sure that we're successful in battling global jihad. And that's not just with our arms, although arms we need, strengthen our military we need, but also we have to help moderate Muslims so they can protect the extreme. We got a lot of work to do, and I'm going to bring change to Washington. And by the way, change is going to begin right here in Iowa. It started at the Iowa, the Ames straw poll. You guys did a great job. How many were at the straw poll? There, I say, oh my goodness, look at this. You're my heroes right here. Thank you. Thank you. How many are going to be at the caucus voting? Ah, yeah, that's even better. Yeah, we're gonna make sure that change begins here. It's going to roll across the country because this is a campaign about changing Washington and strengthening America. Strengthening America by making sure we have strong families where kids get the values that they need to be successful in America and the world. Strong economy by keeping our taxes down, getting off of foreign oil, making sure that we end our illegal immigration problems so we can protect legal immigration. Strong economy, and finally strong military. I want more troops. I want better funding for our equipment and our armament for our troops so they can be successful on the battlefield. And I want better care when our men and women come home. And you know I am an optimist. You know that I'm looking at the future of this country with great hope and confidence. America has everything we need to lead the world and to continue to be the hope of the world. We've got great technology. We've got the heart of the American people. I see that wherever I go. I came here the first time, people said, do you have heartland values? Oh, yes, I do. Then I go to South Carolina, they say, do you have Southern values? Oh, yes, I do. I go to Michigan, do you have Midwest values? Oh, yes, I do. And you know what? They're all the same. All right? Because we love our families, we love our God, we love our country, we'll sacrifice for this country, we love hard work, we value education, we're kind to one another. This is a great nation. These values, whatever you call them, these American values are what convinced me that America's future is even brighter than our past. And I want to be a leader that actually leads, that lays out a vision of where we have to go, that tells people the truth, and that makes sure that we strengthen those values for ourselves and our kids and our grandkids. Thank you so much. Jason, oh, you got all over here?
Our first question is from Hillary, who's from Washington.
Hi, Hillary. From Washington? Now, why are we letting someone from Washington ask a question?
Washington, Iowa.
Oh, okay. I was just beating up on Washington. Now we're going to let her speak. Go ahead. Hi, Hillary.
Hello. I have a question about torture issue that you mentioned briefly. I'm concerned about the CIA using enhanced interrogation techniques because I feel like it really undermines our after or one standard that detaining treatment that outlaws.
You know, we don't believe in torture as a society, and Americans will not participate in torture. But we're not going to describe exactly to the foes that we capture exactly what we can and can't do, because we don't want them to understand precisely what that might be. The CIA does have guidelines and rules that they follow, and they follow those based upon the circumstances that are in place. But obviously the circumstances that would be different if there were, as they refer to it, a ticking time bomb. One of my advisors is a man named Cofer Black, who for 25 or 30 years was the head of counterterrorism for the CIA. And they talk about a circumstance where if you know that there is a bomb in America that's going to go off and kill American lives, then what kind of interrogation technique can you use against that individual? And it's different than when you're just asking somebody to get some basic information. He said what you'd like to do, and the best information you get, by working with someone over a long period of time, by becoming friends, by breaking down the normal barriers that exist. That's what they prefer. But if you got somebody and a bomb's going off for an hour, then you have to follow a different course. Torture, no. But precisely what we're going to do and publish that for the bad guys, we're not doing that either, not in my view. I want to make sure we get the information. Yes. There's a young lady right there, yeah.
My question is really about our troops in Iraq.
Yes.
And I have a problem with our soldiers dying there. I don't think our own men will have to patrol the streets, because if the Iraqis want to kill each other, that's fine with me. I mean, we are going to govern the people who are going to use their head and who will want their country to rise from the ashes. So I think my feeling is, if you want if you could articulate your plan for our troops in Iraq, my first concern is that our troops don't have to guard the streets, and we can always control their economy and make sure that they have the facilities of electric power, water, and all these supplies. And if it needs to be divided, then let it be divided.
Well, first, dividing is they have the ability within their constitution to have states. But the question is, will the country be overtaken by Al-Qaeda or other terror groups and become a safe haven for terror? That's the question, in my view. And fundamentally, we do not want to see Iraq become the kind of safe haven that Afghanistan was under the Taliban. Because if you had a country of Iraq's population and wealth become the safe haven for Al-Qaeda or Hezbollah or any other terror group, then they would, from that position, train, recruit, staff, and launch attacks against us. And the reason we went into Afghanistan was not just to teach them a lesson, but to get rid of that safe haven and to put Al-Qaeda on the run. And so for me in Iraq, one of the key objectives we have to keep in mind is making sure we do not have safe havens there. And our military and the surge they carried out, which was a frontline surge, this was to put our troops out there first, was to lock down the country in some respects and to keep a safe haven from being established. And fortunately, Sunnis saw us and said, you know what, we're going to help you get rid of Al-Qaeda. And so the blood and sacrifice of our men and women over these last months during this surge has not been wasted. It has helped protect our people. And that's why I support the surge. I also support seeing us begin to bring our troop level down. General Petraeus says he can do that beginning after the first of the year, about 1 brigade every month. I think you're going to see it keep coming down after that as the Iraqi military takes the frontline responsibility, and General Petraeus says we're going to take the overwatch responsibility. That's a support role: intelligence support, logistics support, aerial support. So we'll be, if you will, behind the lines, and they'll be on the front lines. And over time, you're going to see us playing more and more of a support role, I hope, as the Iraqis themselves are able to protect themselves. But it's key for us not to precipitously withdraw in the sort of Barack Obama style and leave behind an Al-Qaeda stronghold or that for any other group that could come back to threaten our future and launch attacks against America. Thank you. You got a big enough voice, you don't need to use a microphone.
You
right?
got it. I think the last two questions indicates how poorly the American people are informed on the success that we're having in Iraq and Afghanistan, and also in how successful our interrogations go in Gitmo, and that those people are treated fairly. In fact, one of the ways that they get their information is with McDonald's products. They like McDonald's, they like ice cream, and as a result they give out information. And torture is not being used. As president, I'd like to see something like this, where you take the lead in communicating to the American people out of the White House with the help of those serving in Iraq who are coming back to report on the real success, so that the American people are better informed instead of getting the negative treatment such as General Petraeus received from the liberal leaders in the House and Senate.
One of the most revealing and disappointing developments during this campaign season was to see MoveOn.org suggest that a man who is putting his life on the line, living in Iraq, there is no safe place in Iraq. Living in Iraq is dangerous. There are missiles and rockets that come into the most safe areas, the green areas. He is living there. He's living there because he believes in this country and he's fighting for our lives and our safety. For them to say that he would betray us is an outrage. And then to have Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama refuse to distance themselves, and to call that kind of outrage and infamy what it was a surprise to me. I also agree that the president has a responsibility of commander-in-chief, but also educator-in-chief. And I remember remember when Ross Perot was running for president, he had those charts, you know, and he'd show you those charts, and we laughed at them, but you know, he did teach us some things. I can't remember all the things he taught us, but it's important for the president to teach the American people what's going on and to be honest about the successes and the failures. Now, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was before my time, but my parents used to talk about fireside chats and talk about the successes and the failures. And we got to be honest about about what we face and make sure people understand why it is we're there. And for me, in Iraq, the minimum level of success is we don't want to have safe havens for terror, like the Taliban opening up their doors as they did to Al-Qaeda. That is something we simply will not allow. Thank you. Yes, ma'am, right here, Linda.
Real quickly, I want a president I can respect, and I want the rest of the world to respect my president, and that's you, sir, that's you. Now, a fun question. What are your two favorite spectator sports? To watch on TV or in person?
Okay, what are my two favorite spectator sports? My best is watching my boys fight over dinner. I got 5 boys, and they're our favorite meals. My favorite meal is meatloaf cakes. Now you might wonder, I get these, they're about this long. They're little meatloaf cakes that my wife makes, and she puts a sweet sauce in it, cinnamon, ketchup, that's very good on the top, and then we have mashed potatoes and corn on the cob, and a couple of other little goodies there, cornbread and so forth. That's my favorite meal. And when that's on the table, we have fights over who gets how much of what. No, now seriously, what's my favorite sport? I love baseball. I have to be honest with you. I love baseball. If you're from Boston, the Red Sox, the Red Sox are just such a big deal in Boston. I've fallen in love with them, and they're only 1 game away from being eliminated, but hopefully they'll pull it out here. And I love watching a good football game too. College football I enjoy college football even more than the pros to watch. There's so many sports. Of course, I love the Olympics too. I have to be honest. And that's watching the Olympics, and you had a wrestler, didn't you, who got a medal? Joe Williams, is that his name here? A couple of years ago. This is what is it about wrestling in this state? I don't know what it is. You got some great wrestlers in Iowa, and so I like watching sport. I wish I were better at it myself. That's the honest truth. I wasn't the world's greatest athlete. If you hadn't heard that, you might think, well, you're tall enough. You're 6'2". You must have been good at basketball. No, not really. I wrestled in the I think 7th and 8th grade, first couple of grades in high school, and I was about the same height I am now, but I just weighed about 50 pounds less. And guys would look across and say, now here I'm wrestling that guy. They look at me and say, you're kidding me. That guy looks like a string bean. And so when I took on the Olympic job, my sons saw the irony that the guy who was such a mediocre athlete would become the person in charge of the premier sporting event in the world. And my oldest son, when he saw it in the paper, he knew it was coming, but when he saw it in the paper, he said, Dad, I talked to the brothers this morning. We've seen USA Today. And we want you to know there's not a circumstance we could have conceived of that would put you on the front page of the sports section. And I was there. Thank you. One question. Yes.
They're from Davenport. I'm going to shift from before into a more domestic issue, and it is with higher education and our taxes. Right now in this country, we have the federal Pell Grant system and also the HOPE credits and lifetime learning credits for funding your higher education. And right now, the HOPE only goes for the first 2 years, where the lifetime learning goes for other, and it does not include stuff like your books, which right now for any college person, the amount for books are just going through the roof, and for other expenses. And my question is, do you have any vision for what you would like to do? Because the HOPE covers for the first 2 years at 100%, but lifetime earning only goes for 20% of how much you spend directly to the institution. And for people that are non-traditional students or middle-class families, this is a concern. And as a parent, and also as a senior at the University of Iowa, it's a big issue because I still have a graduate school. I'm wondering what you would do to fix those kind of loopholes to encourage people to become doctors and lawyers and get a degree in engineering and stuff that would actually improve our chances of competing in a global market.
Let me tell you a couple things that I've done and that I have in mind. One is my plan to allow middle-class families to save their money tax-free means that moms and dads that have kids know that they can save their money and it's going to roll up and grow without having to pay taxes on it. I want to see us save more so that kids have an education nest egg they can use when they get to college rather than just having to borrow when they get there. So one, tax-free savings for all Americans earning $200,000 a year and less is designed to help people be able to pay for their own education and not have to borrow it from government. Number two, I like the idea of rewarding excellence. Now, when I was governor of Massachusetts, we had a program for the poor to help them go to college, which is great. and a valuable thing to do. But I also wanted to have a program that supported middle-class families and kids who are doing real well. And so I fought and got instituted something known as the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship. And that is, if you graduate in the top quarter of your high school, and we measure that by taking a statewide exam, you graduate in the top quarter, you get an Adams Scholarship, 4 years tuition free at the state university or state college of your choice. Now, fees are even higher in Massachusetts than tuition, but it's a big indication that we support excellence. And finally, I like the idea of linking the level of support that we're able to provide to young people going to college to the contributions they're going to make to our society. And I don't have a great plan for doing that right now, but one way we did do that in our state that made a difference was this, and it seems kind of narrow, but I like the principle, and that is, we were noticing that our National Guard enrollment was going down every year, a few percent every year. And the legislature and I came together with a bill we called the Welcome Home Bill, and it said, if you sign up for the National Guard, we'll give you a 4-year tuition-free and fee-free scholarship to any one of our state institutions of higher learning. Because you're making a sacrifice by serving in the Guard, we're going to make a sacrifice by making your education free. And those kinds of principles, I think, make a difference. So I would look to see if we can't find a way to link our programs to reward excellence, to reward people that are able to make a contribution to our society in the military or in other ways. And finally, by making sure that people are able to save their money tax-free and roll it up so they can help pay for education. Thank you. I guess they're picking the questions and I'm not. Go ahead, or the questioners.
Why do you think that young people aren't more involved in the political process? And what do you think needs to be done to get them more involved?
You know, let me ask you, before I answer that question, as a young person, and I'll go back to why I wasn't as involved when I was in college as I am today, but why do you think young people are not as involved in the political process?
They don't read a newspaper? I don't know what's going on, I guess.
Yeah, but you know, most young people, follow the internet. I mean, my kids, I asked them, do you get the newspaper? My boys, I don't think any one of them get the newspaper, but they all get their news on the internet, and they have their sites they go to. Of course, most of it's ESPN or whatever. But what do you think? I mean, any thoughts about? I mean, one of the concerns I've had is that young people think, well, I don't have to worry about that for some time. It's not my issue. It'll be my issue when I start making money and I have a family. Then I'll care about those things. But right now, it's not my issue. But the truth is, it is their issue, because the decisions that are being made now are going to influence them dramatically. If we keep overspending in Washington, then they're the ones that are going to have to pay it back. I thought Hillary Clinton's idea was most amusing, which is giving every child, every baby born, $5,000 bond, regardless, by the way, of whether they have a mom and dad or not, or whether they're legal or illegal, just to give everybody $5,000. And of course, given the nature of the national debt, she didn't tell people that she'd have to borrow $5,000 from each kid and give them $5,000. And so that's accomplishing nothing. But the decision, for instance, energy. We could be, by the time somebody in college gets to middle age, we could be energy independent. This nation could say, we don't need oil from Ahmadinejad or Chavez or Putin or anybody. We're energy independent. We could be there if we got serious about it now. But it's going to take young people to say, yeah, I want to get that done. And maybe it's partly our fault, those of us that are running for office. We don't spend more time on campus. And we probably should spend some more time with students and say, guys, get involved and get educated. And don't listen to what your professors tell you. They're all liberals. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. A lot of them are. But they got to hear the other side. Yes, ma'am. The global warming. And the question was, what about global warming? And the answer is, I think the planet's getting warmer. And I think we're probably contributing to it. And my view is this. I want to make sure that we reduce our greenhouse gases by becoming energy independent. We were just talking about energy independence. It's the same topic. If we use ethanol, cellulosic ethanol, biodiesel, biofuel, wind power, solar power, nuclear power, liquefied coal, if we use our resources, we can become energy independent. And if we have vehicles far more fuel efficient, and homes more energy efficient, businesses more efficient, then we can become balanced and not have to buy all this stuff from other people. And if we use those resources with efficiency on one side and renewable resources on the other, we lowered our greenhouse gases. That's the way I'd go about it unilaterally. I'd like to help other nations do the same. If we're going to have a global effort, then let's make it global. They don't call it America warming. They call it global warming. And so we want to make sure that China and India and Indonesia and Brazil are also part of any effort that we're going to have to get global greenhouse gas emissions down. Is it an issue we care about? Absolutely. And our answer is to work with other nations to get this done on a global basis. And number two, get ourselves energy independent. I'm told I got one more question. Yes.
Last question is from Richard from Davenport.
Hi, Richard.
I would like to know more about your healthcare proposal, and I'm sure the other people here would also.
Great, thank you. Question about my health care proposal. I love this topic. And it's something I should tell you, I spent a lot of time on. I mentioned that I was a consultant when I came out of school in a consulting firm, and I helped build a healthcare consulting practice. I consulted to hospitals. And so I learned something about healthcare then. And then when I became an investor, I started my company. It was an investment company. We started a surgical center chain. We did ophthalmic surgery, cataract surgery in our chain. And I learned something about healthcare then. And when I became governor, a friend of mine said, you got to find a way to get everybody health insurance. I said, that's impossible. I don't want to raise taxes, and I don't want to have government take over healthcare. And he said, yeah, but you got to get a way to get this done. And so I began working on it, thinking on it, got together with the Democrats at some point, and we came up with an idea that was kind of interesting. We had sort of a brainstorm. We said, you know what? Everybody in America has health care today. They just don't have health care insurance. Now, maybe that's a bit of an overstatement, but let me describe what I mean. At least in my state, if you're uninsured and you have a heart attack, we don't have you die in your apartment. They pick you up in the emergency vehicle, they take you to the hospital, put you in the emergency room, maybe you need surgery, they give you surgery, they give you the drugs you need, you go home. Who paid for that? Your insurance company didn't because you were uninsured. So you guys paid for it, all right? The taxpayers paid for it. Or people who are buying insurance are having to pay some money for the people who don't have it. And so we said, gosh, that means we're already paying for health care for everybody. What would happen if instead of just putting that money into the hospitals for giving out free care, we use that money to help people buy their own insurance? Insist that they pay what they can afford, and we'll pick up the rest. That was the idea. Well, first we found out that half the people that didn't have insurance could afford to buy it. They just figured, why buy it if I can get care for free? So we said to them, no more free ride. You either buy insurance or you pay your own way in the hospital. No more free ride. And then for the others that needed help, we found it was no more expensive for us to help them buy private insurance than it was for us to be giving free money to giving money to the hospital. And by the way, after we worked on this plan, you might think, oh, this must have been a battle. Republicans and Democrats going at each other. You know, the business community pulling one way, the hospitals another, the doctors another. Actually, all the groups in our state came together and said, you know what? Governor's plan's a pretty good idea. And when it was voted on by the legislature, if you put the two houses together, House and Senate, it was passed 198 to 2. Virtually everybody was in favor. Now, I wouldn't impose our plan on Iowa or Texas or Illinois because there are differences between states. But I'd allow our federal money to be used in such a way that states can create their own plans to get their people insured. I think I've laid out a path that gets everybody in America insured. It does something else as well. It makes all your medical expenses tax deductible. So your insurance, your co-pays, your deductible, all of that is tax deductible. I like my plan, but just as much I like the fact that we're making it real clear to Democrats. Healthcare isn't a Democrat issue. Education's not a Democrat issue. The environment isn't a Democrat issue. Those are Republican issues. We have answers. We're going to talk about it. We're going to get the job done because change begins with us. Thank you so much. Great to see you.